the screen
Y-
what I
Yes,
that I
indeed.
share?
Yes, I
What?
can see the screen.
Yep.
Thank
Yep.
you. Bless your heart. Oh God, I did it again. Okay.
I think you muted just as you started sharing screen, so
Oh, okay. I'll keep an eye out for that.
Okay, I can
well,
hear
just
you now
just in
though.
case you were wondering about what you said that we didn't catch.
I
I think
am.
that's where it started. Yeah.
Oh, that's you, Nick. Thank you. You're a doll. Okay. Yeah. All right. You can see it. We're doing it now. Yes? Thumbs up. Thumbs up in the cameras. Okay. Um, here we go. So this is Stop Feeling Like Shit, a slideshow by me. And I've got some preamble and I'm going to say it now. Hi, my name is Megan Lance. I'm a cartoonist and animation person from Montreal and a volunteer with the Cartoonist Co-op. I'd like to thank them for the opportunity to give this talk. Special thanks to Nero, who helped me out before you guys got here, and for helping me to put on this event. So this is Stop Feeling Like Shit. And the premise is that feeling like shit is the biggest barrier to our best work. I'm going to put up a little roadmap because I'm always more relaxed when I know where I'm going. So we've got an intro coming up. We're going to define our terms, feeling like shit. I'm going to make a case for not feeling like shit. You already have everything you need, and then a conclusion, and God willing, a Q&A. Okay, part one, introduction. So the idea for this talk came from this meme, these hard art pills. If you're on Twitter, you've likely seen this going around every few months. It's a picture of hard to swallow pills, and people typically quote tweet it with some advice. It's usually about addressing skills deficits. I think most of us know what our skills deficits are, so I'm not sure how effective these have ever been. But if you encounter them at the right place and the right time, maybe they'll solve a problem for you. And I don't take issue with this at a base level. A lot of this is good advice, and I don't think there's any malice or anything at work here. But in my opinion, they don't address the single biggest pain point I see among artists, which is feeling like shit. So I made this tweet as a little bit of a corrective to the kind of advice that usually accompanies the hard to swallow pill. The truth is, most of us are already trying our best. We're already taking a number of hard pills. And this tweet got a lot of traction. For comparison, this is how an average tweet does for me. It's got like 8 likes. And obviously, I'm not changing lives with a tweet, but the reaction to the previous one suggested to me that I'm not the only one who suspects that feeling bad is holding me back, and I'm not the only one struggling to integrate this information into my whole deal. Part two, what we talk about when we talk about feeling like shit. Excuse me. So you may have noticed a similarity between these and these and these. I want to give you a moment to drink this in. I'm kind of proud of it. But I also want to give a disclaimer. I don't know whether some of these are jokes, and there are some I'm not sure what they mean. But it's a format I recognize. The advice is prescriptive, lightly judgy, hyper-individual bootstrap stuff. And this can feel like tough love, right? The implication is that if we avoid the hard stuff, if we avoid struggle, we'll never be our best selves or make our best work. Being our best takes rigor, it takes discipline. We got to toughen up and take the hard pill. Nothing worth having comes easy. And if we're our own bosses to some degree, if we freelance or work in isolation or just manage most of our own time, we may feel like we gotta drive ourselves hard because nobody else will. The underlying idea is that shame is a motivator. We can successfully shame ourselves into substantive change, and failure to do so warrants only more shame. And this underpins a lot of self-help, broadly speaking, but particularly the kind of entrepreneurial strain that we're looking at here. You are both worker and boss, and if you aren't performing at top capacity, then both of you are fucking up. Specifically, a lot of us be your own boss types have productivity shame. So I got this definition from a slideshow from University of California, Santa Cruz. Productivity shame, quote, stops you from feeling like you have done enough. It's why you feel guilty for watching TV or even walking the dog when you could be doing something more productive. So I thought about putting statistics here about the ineffectiveness of shame, but the reality is we know shame is not an effective motivator, or we wouldn't still be looking at the pill tweets, right? I'm jam-packed with shame, and it has never successfully motivated me to do anything. And you might have already intuited that this is sort of personal language for a structural problem. This is internalized capitalism. These are institutional and systemic pressures that don't start and end with our work. And comically, I notice myself doing this even in situations where the outcome absolutely will not be profit or acclaim, like when I'm starting a new hobby or even making an incredible tweet. It's not work, but I find myself thinking, is this good enough for someone to pay me for it? The only benchmark of quality there is. And if it isn't, I feel a little bit shitty. I should be using this time for something more productive. And in fairness, we get a lot of mixed messages about the relationship between work and fun. Love your work, but not too much. Be humbled by gratitude for your job, but relentlessly strive for more output, status, and money. If your work feels too pleasurable, you're not pushing yourself hard enough. But if you feel overburdened, you're not grateful enough for your job. And most of us started because it was pleasurable, right? We love drawing and telling stories because it feels good. But if we want to be good enough to earn money, the only meaningful benchmark of quality, we're taught to be suspicious of that pleasure. Our pleasure is a cue that we're misusing our time. If we don't feel a little bit shitty, we're doing it wrong. Part 3, why this is the worst thing that has ever happened to you in your life. So here's where we get into it. I'm going to make a case that feeling like shit is not only unnecessary, it's a liability. It's a detriment to making your best work. And I'm going to be talking about myself a lot here because this is unfortunately very much a doctor heal thyself situation. I feel like shit. In fact, feeling like shit has held me back more than any skill deficits I could possibly have. So in my 20s, I was making a lot of comics on Tumblr. Here's some stuff from around that time. And this was a wildly productive period for me. Nobody was paying attention, and I didn't know what I was doing, and I got a really good momentum going with that. This is probably the healthiest relationship I have ever had with my creative output. And that went on for a couple of years, but eventually I was dissatisfied with what I was doing. And that's normal. I think that's normal to some degree. Specifically, the work that came easily wasn't the kind of work I wanted to make. I got kind of embarrassed doing what came easily. I had really internalized that struggle was the key to legitimacy. I think this was further complicated by the fact that I was starting to get paid work in comics. I was writing and drawing a monthly strip for a kids magazine. I started doing some auto-bio stuff for the Nib. So I had this imposter syndrome where the stakes felt high. And even though I was evidently good enough to work and I never got any feedback to suggest otherwise, I felt like I wasn't measuring up. My be your own boss was a lot tougher on me than my actual bosses. So I had been cranking out work at a pretty good clip, and I thought that if I wanted to make my best work, I'd have to slow down. So I slowed down. I stopped, in fact. And when I say your best work in general, I mean the best work that is attainable to you, that is satisfying but sustainable. you're feeling challenged, but you're not killing yourself making it. But when I talk about myself back then and say my best work, I mean specifically a platonic ideal I had in my 20s of what my masterpiece would look like. I wanted to make work that was more visually complex, more profound, more serious and taken seriously. That was a big one. I was making primarily short form autobio comics or like funny animal things, but I wanted to make blankets. So this is Blankets by Craig Thompson. There were other graphic novels big around that time, but for me, these were the most beautiful drawings in the world, and I really loved the book, and I wanted to make one just like it, even if it meant drawing and writing completely differently, just totally overhauling my workflow. And I did what a lot of us do. I started trying to address the skill deficits that had caught up with me. I felt like these were the gap between the work I was doing and the work I wanted to do. So I got into learning about story, drawing fundamentals, comics language. I tried really hard to ink confidently with a brush. I still don't ink confidently at all. This was a failed endeavor. I basically spent months, if not years, researching and studying and trying to get ready to make whatever this was going to be. And I think the idea was that once I was good enough and armed with the tools to make the platonic ideal best work, I just know because I just stopped feeling like shit. And don't get me wrong, those were and are real skill deficits. And I think frustration with our output is a meaningful cue to work on those. But I also had existing strengths, looseness, economy, shape, being funny that I discarded because if they were easy, they must be worthless, right? After all, nothing worth having is easy. So I stopped making comics after that. I psyched myself out so hard, I all but stopped. I never got the kinds of draftsmanship or storytelling chops I was trying to beat myself into acquiring either. I probably would have come a lot further if I just kept making comics, like any comics. And an unfortunate byproduct was that I also lost touch with the stuff I was good at before I trained it out of me. Like, I appreciate that stuff now because it doesn't come so easily anymore. It's use it or lose it, bro. And I lost something. I think that can be a less discussed aspect of this. I look at old work and I'm like, who was that? How did I do that? I was doing stuff instinctively that I would have to think a lot harder to do now. So now we're here. I'm no closer to my platonic best work, but I'm also further away from what I was doing right before. And crucially, I still feel like shit. And most of us have encountered some version of this where we kind of get lost in the sauce or preoccupied with the wrong thing. We overwork a piece to death, or we over intellectualize an idea, or we fall in a research hole and never come out. Even though we know that overthinking or even just messing with something too much can kill it, the risk is ever present. So, Steve Albini recently died, and this letter he wrote to Nirvana about producing in utero was going around. He leaves a complicated legacy, but I like that record and I like this quote. I like to leave room for accidents or chaos, making a seamless record where every note and syllable is in place and every bass drum is identical is no trick. Any idiot with the patience and the budget to allow such foolishness can do it. I prefer to work on records that aspire to greater things, like originality, personality, and enthusiasm. So he's talking about punk music here, and there's a political ethos about eschewing the sanitized and the conservative that he's referring to. But he's also talking about something that we know in our gut is true. Originality, personality, and enthusiasm are qualities that can feel baked into a work. They can feel so germane, we don't consider how they got there. We just know them when we see them. But they're unexpectedly fragile. They can be dulled or lost entirely with too much shining up, like Albini cautions Nirvana about, and they can also be stamped out by shame. You can lose something legitimately valuable by working harder and feeling worse. But nothing is lost forever, and your best work is still inside of you. I'm going to take a swig of water here. Excuse me. Part 4, the rock is never empty. So I talk a lot about what's in you to make. This is a really important idea for me, and I want to get into it a little bit by talking about Whisper of the Heart. This feels like a detour, but it isn't. So Whisper of the Heart is a Studio Ghibli film from 1995. It's not overlooked by any stretch, but it's not as popular as your Kikis and your Totoros. So I'm going to give you a little summary. So it's the story of a middle school girl, Shizuku. She's good at writing and she gets some praise for it, but she's dismissive. She's not particularly driven to write, so the praise feels unearned and uncomfortable. She loves to read. She's always in the library, but she describes her reading habits as goofing around reading books while her peers are studying. So she's got some productivity shame too. And through a series of coincidences, she meets this kid, Seiji Amasawa, who lives with his grandfather in this magical antique store. Seiji is learning to make violins. He's so serious about it, he goes away to Italy for 2 months to apprentice with a master luthier, and this is going to be his life. He'll work hard for what he estimates to be 10 years until he's good enough to make the best violins. He likes Shizuku, and maybe more importantly, he likes her writing, and she believes him. And that sparks something in her. She decides that for the 2 months Seiji will be gone, she'll take her writing seriously, eschewing her usual reading habits and neglecting her studies even more, and just writing furiously. And in the end, it's good. She shows her story to the grandpa, and he confirms that it's really good, that it's unpolished, but he was moved by its heartfelt sincerity. And for our purposes, that's more or less the movie. Seiji comes back and says that he's not great, but he has potential, and he'll be returning to Italy after high school. And Shizuku also finds that her dedication has paid off. She's not great yet, but she could be. So, an oft cited theme of Whisper of the Heart is dedication to craft and the rewards of hard work. Persistence wins the day, not talent. And this is kind of a strange fit. I feel like it's at odds with the case I'm making, right? But I bring it up because there's a metaphor in it I really like. So, around halfway through the runtime, the old antiques man is counseling Shizuku about the life of an artist, and he hands her a geode and he says this: when you first become an artist, you're like that rock. You're in a raw, natural state with hidden gems inside. You need to dig down deep and find the emeralds tucked away inside of you. He goes on for some length here about polishing, but then he adds, the smaller crystals are much more valuable, and there may be some even deeper inside that you can't see. So in the context of the film, I think the big takeaway is supposed to be polishing. Shizuku needs to polish her gems a lot if she's going to unearth something quote unquote valuable. And polishing is important, not just to create value, but to make our work legible, to share it with other people. Grandpa can't read our story if we don't get it into readable shape. But what resonates with me is that whether Shizuku polishes them or not, those crystals are in there, even deep inside where she can't see. They were there when she was goofing off. They were there before she knew she was a writer. And at the end of the film, when she stops writing to focus on her exams, they'll be there waiting when she comes back. And getting at those stones is subtractive, not additive, right? The references to unearthing, digging, polishing, those are processes of refining and honing what's already there. She has everything she needs already. All she has to do is dig. So when I talk about the work that's in me to make, I think some of it is acknowledging limitations. I think it's in part about understanding that I'm not going to make blankets, or rather that making it will be a torturous experience yielding mediocre results. And that tension between the work I love to read and the work I can feasibly make is really painful. That's something I was resistant to for a long time. And I think when I was so focused on acquiring skills, racking up hours of study, taking on a borrowed drawing and writing voice, I was suffocating my real best work under an imagined one. But there's still a story in me to tell, otherwise, I wouldn't keep trying to tell it, right? There are emeralds in there, and they are worth digging for. And I think those innate qualities, the things we already have inside, are where we're going to find that originality, personality, and enthusiasm that Albini was talking about. Those are the emeralds. And like, yeah, in my case, what's inside isn't the thing I wanted, but it's not empty. The rock is never empty. Part 5, conclusion. So obviously, I still struggle with this, but I'm 40 now and I've had to confront the fact that I may never make this thing. This may not be among the gems inside of me, but I look at my career and I think of so many times I would have been in less pain, physically, mentally, whatever, if I'd let it be easy. Not by making lesser work, whatever that means, but by letting the good qualities of my work be good, by not making things hard on purpose. The good news is what's in me to make is still in there. The emeralds are still there. When I draw for pleasure, however infrequently, and I see shapes I used to love making, subjects I love thinking about, that sensory feeling that just feels really good with the right pen, you know? I don't get there by muscling through, I get there by loosening up. And loosening up is hard as hell, man. But working harder and feeling worse won't get me there. It can't. So I'm making a case for why not to feel like shit, but you've likely noticed I don't have a lot of answers regarding how. In fact, I briefly considered calling this talk How I Learned to Stop Worrying and Take the Easy Pill, but I haven't and I don't. Sorry. So I can't give you that, but I can give you permission. You're already working hard enough. You are not being held back by a failure to work hard. You already feel bad enough. You are not being held back by having insufficient shame. You already have everything you need, and your best work is already inside of you. I hope you'll give yourself a chance to find it. Thank you. The end. So I left time for some Q&A. I'm really hoping for some cues, but I'm also just interested in how you feel. Do you feel like shit? Do you not struggle with this at all? Do you like Whisper of the Heart? I really like it. So whatever you want to tell me, I say go for it. And I will stop screen sharing now. Hi.
Oh, sorry. Did you talk about me? My hand is up, so
Oh, sorry. I don't have it pulled down. Do I call on people?
Uh, oh.
Well, you're talking, so go ahead.
Hi. First of all, thank you very much for taking the time to make this presentation. This is actually really helpful for me. And second, I I definitely feel how you feel with the struggles of imposter syndrome and feeling like shit for stuff. That's literally me since like I want to go to storyboarding for TV animation, and I've over the past year I've had a year gap of not storyboarding, and I'm only recently going back to it, and I'm I'm really sorry. Sometimes if I don't think of an answer, I go blank and it's bad. So I'm working on the story that I've had on the side for the year, and I've been doing all of these roughs, and every time I look at them, they don't always feel clear. And every time I have to clean them, I have to be very, very clean, like very smooth, no line breaks. not just being clear, but it has to be very illustrative. And is that a feeling that you struggle with too? Sorry if that's a big question.
No, no, no. That's like so real. And I don't know if you asked because you know this, I also do storyboards for TV animation.
Nice.
And I'm always a little embarrassed, but when I get a new soup, one of the questions I ask is how clean is clean? Because I'm not naturally given to working clean. And so, like you, I can end up really spinning my wheels on this stage that is actually like one of the least important components of the actual job. I mean, clarity is
God.
important, but cleanliness is not. So I feel this. It is so easy to get lost in the sauce. And for me, getting sent home for COVID and working from home made this so much worse because I couldn't see my colleagues' work habits and I couldn't see like how everybody else was doing. Not that it's a race, but like I think working in isolation, especially a team sport like TV, doing it in isolation really breeds that kind of like narrowing of focus on stuff that isn't necessarily important to the big picture. I fully relate to this.
Thank you. I think it's also for me, I'm neurodivergent, so I always get these voices in my head like, is it good? Is it bad? Is it eligible? Like, so
Yes, hi. I too am neurodiverse and I too experience those voices. Yeah, I think it's hard to differentiate like what is brain mechanical stuff and what is sort of like internalized feeling uncertainty. But yes, oh man, yes, all the time. I got a hand up. Do I click the hand? This is Benny. Hi, Benny.
Oh,
Um,
hi, that's me.
hi.
Hi. I just wanted to say this was a great presentation. Thanks. And Whisper of the Heart is a really good movie.
Yes.
Excellent film. And it's funny, I happened to just see that this was happening tonight and I popped in and it just happened to be at a time where I've been obsessing over many of the things that you were talking about, although I suppose it's something that people often do. But yeah, I really related especially to you talking about some of your older work and seeing qualities in it that you're like, oh, I kind of struggle for that now, even though I used to do it so easily back then. And I was actually just thinking about that today, looking at some of my old work again, coincidentally. I was like, oh, I used to be so good at this and that. What happened?
Isn't that such a thing?
Yeah.
That's such a thing. It's like looking back, I mentioned in the talk I'm 40, so I'm a ways out of like a lot of my younger pictures of myself. And a lot of people experience the sensation of looking back on times where you felt awkward or maybe unattractive and thinking, my gosh, I was so cute. And I feel that way looking at my old work where I must have been insecure about it at the time. I've never not been insecure, but my
Hmm.
God, who was that?
Yeah, even stuff that's as recent as like a year or two old. I'm like,
Hmm.
huh. I'm like, I even forget how I did that or how I did this. Well, I don't forget, but I sort of don't have that sort of natural inclination anymore. So I very much related to that and very much made me want to sort of tap into that again. So yeah,
Oh,
thanks.
I'm delighted. Thank you so much for letting me know.
Of course, it's going to take some doing, but yeah.
You're telling me. Good Godspeed, Benny. We
Thank
got
you.
our hands up. Nero, do I unmute people? And if so, how?
I think they can unmute themselves.
Oh,
I
okay.
think if you just can you see their names when you hover your
Yes, I
cursor
can.
over their so just call them out by name
Okay,
and they can take it from there, I think.
super. Okay, Zachary Torricelli. Hi.
That's Torricella
Oh, sorry about that. Thank you.
with an H. So, from one cartoonist and animation fan to another, you've made quite a lot of interesting points on your slideshow today. And I
you.
must say, I'm really touched.
Oh, thank you. Thank you so much for letting me know. My gosh, I'm delighted. You're a doll. Thank you.
Especially since I've been drawing characters beforehand. I've been slacking off, so I gotta get my head back in the game.
Well, don't be
Thanks
tough
to
on yourself,
you.
but
And it's
yeah.
thanks to you that I'm getting back in the game.
Oh, well, gosh, I'm moved. Thank you. Thank you for letting me know that.
Well, probably more positive thanks to this meeting.
Oh,
So is it if it's careful, would we be careful? How how will we know if we're gonna be careful with if we're starting to feel like doo-doo or not? Is there a way to avoid feeling like doo-doo? I
um,
came up with one.
go
There's
ahead.
one doo-doo is anxiety.
Mm. Yeah, managing anxiety is important. And I was actually talking to Nick, who's in here somewhere, about this recently. Unfortunately, the solution to most of these problems is just like talking to another person. So much of this is bred by like isolation. And when you put your work or even like your sort of inner world in front of another person, um, it you even that little bit of distance makes it look better. And it's easier to stop sort of narrowing, like I was talking about earlier. So I would say if I had advice to give, and this for me is the hardest pill, um, share it around, spread out. We've got a hand up. It is Jion Shim with a picture of a cat. Hi.
Hi, I have my Bluetooth headphones in, but they're shitty. Can you hear my sound quality okay?
I do. You sound great.
Okay. Okay, great. I have two questions. Hopefully they're quick. The first is, oh, first of all, also, I love Whisper of the Heart. I think it's one of my favorite Ghibli movies. It's such a shame that he passed and wasn't able to like get the training a successor like Miyazaki wanted, but
I
he had that movie
know.
and it's so beautiful. My first question is for people who like especially right now due to like the politicization of COVID and other increasingly like infectious diseases, we have to isolate at home because of our health, long COVID, that kind of thing. And I definitely know what you mean. I worked on a job that was like very in person, very team oriented. And I thrive in that kind of environment and I really miss it. But like my health isn't negotiable. Do you have any like scope of what strategies maybe that you used while you were still in isolation of like how to avoid that tunnel vision of that just kind of happens when you're working by yourself at home?
Yeah. So I am very much still in isolation. I was
Oh,
living in LA.
solidarity.
Oh, sorry.
Oh, I said solidarity.
Hey. So I was living in LA for about 2 months when we got sent home for work from home for COVID. And we were still working from home at the time my visa ran out. And so I was fortunate I was able to move back to Montreal, where I am now, and into my mom's house, where I am now. And I want to protect her and me and my community. I mean, I feel a duty of care. And unfortunately, with public health guidance being largely absent, that
Hmm.
for me has meant a lot of time alone in the house.
Yeah. Yeah.
So yeah, navigating this is legitimately hard. I have been finding my work as far as TV work less rewarding ever since I have
Mm,
been working from home. And like you, I used to call it the social vitamin. I used to live alone and get the social vitamin at the office. And that for me
mm.
was healthy. And having a structure around that was really healthy. And I'm not thriving. So
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm short on advice. I feel like the obvious advice is, if you can safely be outside in the summer, that's how I typically see people within reason. And
Mm,
I online communities, but I also, this is a thing I miss, and I have legitimate grief around that. And I would
yeah.
to pretend that there's a legitimate substitute. There isn't.
Yeah. Yeah, I really feel you on that, on all those
Yeah.
points. But thank you for sharing your experience there. The
Thank
the
you.
second question is a little more technical, which is that I'm what I would consider like a beginning stage as a visual artist, but the skills as I build them are kind of like outpacing my project calendars. So I have these calendars that are like longer development, and then when I like go back to like a first page or something, I'll be like, oh shit, I need to fix all of this because I actually can now. Like I didn't see the errors at the time. But after this talk, I'm like, is that me spinning my wheels actually? I'm like second guessing my own kind of like learning process a little bit. Do you have any insight on that?
Yeah. Good news, bad news. I still do that. Everyone still does that. I saw not that long ago a panel for the comics festival here. Jill Tamaki was on it, who is a cartoonist with a
Wow.
lot of great books under her belt. And she was
Yeah, I love
saying
her
that
work.
still she starts inking the book from the middle because she doesn't want it to be a progression end to end of like less good to good. You know what I mean? So this
That's
is like
such a good tip, actually. That's so good.
go nuts. Um, but for me, like, look, everyone's workflow is different. I hesitate to be prescriptive, although I do err on the side of like, let her rip and don't look back. For
Mm.
me, that has been a way of spinning my wheels. It has been a way of sort of like delaying, sort of pulling the trigger on releasing something or finishing something. And the you know what I see in myself, I'm kind of back where I started emotionally when I think about like where I was in my 20s, and now like I just want to make stuff without the kind of considerations that I've taken on in the years since. And what gave me the most momentum was finishing literally anything. I'm sure you've heard this elsewhere, but like sometimes you just need a win. So
Yeah.
if you can stomach it, just keep it moving.
Hell yeah. Thank you so much. I really appreciate you taking the time.
Thank you. Okay, we got Isadora Bach with a hand up.
As a heads up, Megan, we have some YouTube questions that I can read off after Isadora goes.
That'd be great. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
YouTube questions. Thank you, Nero. Okay,
Hi.
Isadora, hi.
Hi, can you hear me okay?
Yep, I can.
All right. Well, first of all, thank you so much. This was really helpful. I mean, it's always helpful to hear other artists who are struggling as well. I mean, it's not fun, but since we're all here, I mean,
Yeah. Catharsis
feels
can
like
be
alone.
fun.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But what I wanted to say was that, well, first, this talk came in a very good timing because I am also feeling like shit. And I'm also in the process of like this whole year has been about trying to kind of like come out of a block, like an art block. And I just wanted to share some things that helped for me and that have been very helpful. The first one is thinking about art more like projects and like giving myself a bunch of limitations. So like as many limitations as I can. So like, oh, I'm gonna do this until like tomorrow, and I'm only gonna use this pen, you know, and just setting myself little challenges. Maybe that's an ADHD thing, but I feel like it's very helpful because then you don't feel like overwhelmed by all of the amazing things you can do and like the great work you could have done if only you had like the best pen in the world and like all the time in your hands and you know like that's
Best
not going to
pen
change anything.
is such a trap. I know that trap so intimately. I have so many pens. I also have ADHD, so I
Same.
don't have outside insight, but I'm obsessed with constraints. Constraints are so good.
Yes. What's also been helping me a lot is like making work that I consider bad and forcing myself to show it to people. So making like ugly drawings, making comics about things that I would normally not share, and just like trying to get over the shame and this false idea that, oh, no one's going to relate to it, no one's going to like it. Because like any time that I've done this has been when I got like the best feedback on my work and like the most enthusiastic response. So
Oh, that's
eventually I realized
wonderful.
that it's like it's nothing about any of the things that we care about. It's not about like having good drawings. It's not about having like, I don't know, like the best story, the best anything. It's just about putting yourself out there and making something that feels genuine. And that usually comes with making something that you feel is not good enough. So
Oh my God, that's like so insightful. Making something genuine is necessarily something you feel like isn't good enough. That's really
yeah.
beautiful. Thank you.
Oh, thank you. Lots of therapy. And talking to
Oh, go ahead.
people. Yeah, I think that's like the last thing is just like talking to everyone, like talking to artists and trying to have deep conversations with people because they're usually very open about this. If you ask them, "Oh, how did you feel about this? How did you feel about like your last work? Do you currently feel good about your work?" They're usually gonna say no. And when you hear that from coming from people you really admire, I think it really takes off some of that pressure we put on ourselves. I mean, that's how I felt during this talk, at least.
That,
So thank
that's
you for
really,
that. And thank you for
oh,
promoting this space.
oh my gosh, thank you. No, I think that's really beautiful. And I think like coming to those conversations with the vulnerability to just ask someone, how do you feel about your work? Like, that's incredible. You're doing an amazing job.
Thank you.
Yeah,
Trying.
thank you so much for sharing that.
Oh, thank you.
Nero, you had YouTube questions that you wanted to tell me?
I think what we can do is we can just like go back and forth. Like I'll read this one off, and then you can go to Ryan here, and then we can
Okay.
go back and forth. I did want to pass on a compliment from Star Ninja in the YouTube chat. Very motivating and inspirational for artists at all levels. As a person who is recently building their background art portfolio, I often feel like it's not enough. When you said to start slow and to focus on quality, it made me feel really great. I sometimes forget to remind myself that. Thank you.
Oh, well, thank you for letting me know. That's beautiful.
And then the first question from the YouTube chat is from Sloan. What are some exercises or practices that help you unearth your creative gems?
Yeah. So I've talked about this a little bit on Twitter. I'm into warming up, but not like studies. I kind of have these marks I make. They're just the marks that feel good. And I find like if I start from there and like this is a little bit woo-woo, but like kind of making drawings is woo-woo anyway. I'll often be like listening to a song and sort of like draw what I think the shape of it is. And like you're gonna find things that pull you over and over again. I find that thematically in like stories that I want to think about, and I find that a lot in like mark making. And so I find if I like start there and don't like um come at it with too many expectations after that, like, oh my God, this can be whatever money making opportunity. That's where I kind of find like what my gut is telling me. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I think that's great, honestly. That's also
Okay,
something I
cool.
was wondering, so.
Thank you so much. Thanks for asking. Ryan, hi.
Hello. Can you
Thanks
hear
for
me?
being here.
Hey, thanks for doing this. It's great to see you. You can hear me?
Yeah.
Okay, perfect. So I just want to say I just want to echo what Isadora said about doing things bad on purpose is I found a fantastic way to just there's not a very visual element to what I do. I've mostly been like a writer or a performer, but if you're doing improv, just intentionally doing some real bad improv just backstage, great way to start because then it all feels okay. My question for you had to do kind of with I was just curious, do you feel this is something I've maybe noticed in my sort of own experience, but how did you feel like starting to get some measure of sort of incremental success actually like played into sort of to me when I was younger, that started to feel very paralyzing. And I think there were also some undiagnosed mental health things going on that I didn't find out about until later. But that was something I noticed, is that as more doors opened up, everything started to get harder. And like, again, I don't know if that's been your experience. I don't know if that's a very sort of personal thing, or I was
No, no,
wondering if you
no.
could sort of speak to that.
Yeah, totally. I want to preface it by addressing what you were saying right before your question, because for people who don't know me, I know Ryan, and you, I really admire in this regard because you don't seem to have any like self-seriousness or like uptightness around this stuff that I'm always trying to like breed out of myself. So it doesn't come as a surprise to me that you have strategies for this. But yeah, I mean, I brought up in my talk that as soon as I started getting paid work, I kind of froze up. And there is a thing, I think, when, for me at least, when I have more eyeballs on me and more sort of like stakes, whether it's monetary or like God knows what, there's like a narrowing. Like all of a sudden, it feels like before everything was possible, I was doing whatever within constraints, of course, because I need them to function. But as soon as there's an expectation, mine and everyone else's, that narrows, right?
Yeah,
And
the world gets real small.
yes,
Yeah.
and like I don't know a way out of that really. I think that's something we're all kind of like, those are walls we're like pushing against for most of our lives, I think. Yeah, that's such a real thing.
So I mean, yeah, I guess the only advice is like never succeed and you'll be fine.
I had a close friend ask me once, she's a little younger than me, and she said she was nervous about her dreams coming true because then she would have nothing to aspire to. And I was like, don't worry, man. That is a very mobile goalpost. You have nothing to worry about. But thank you so much, Ryan. Thanks for being here, man. Okay, we got a hand up from Adam Lauture, who I also know. Thanks for being here, buddy.
Hey, hello, can you hear me?
I can. How you doing?
Yes, I'm doing good. Thank you for putting this on. It's one is always great to hear from you, and two, it's just great to have this little space. A lot of these thoughts I've already had in my own head, but it felt, I don't know, it felt like it was like an unwritten rule to just not talk about this stuff in the open, I guess. Like I know we're all struggling, but it just felt like a taboo subject to talk about. So I'm glad at least a little bit we're just undoing that.
Thank you so much for being here and for saying so. You're a doll. Yeah, I don't think it's like when I was first starting, I thought I'd be an editorial illustrator, and I was never good at it. But the spaces I was in were always a little more uptight and like professional. And I
Yeah.
had this idea, whether it came from inside or outside, that like, don't talk about your weakness, right? But that's not productive. And thankfully in comics, that's not really a thing. But I will agree that even without that expectation or that like rigidity, we don't really have a space for it, right? Which is something like in the questions and even in my talk, like I'm hearing come up again and again, like we don't have sort of like, for lack of a better word, like a third place, like a community space for what are really like in-group conversations.
Yes.
Yeah.
And I feel like from my personal experience, just very unorthodox path in order to get into this field and being lucky enough to work like 2 straight years as a PA, I don't know, it feels like really hard for me to like relate to people who, you know, were working like in like animation or art like pre-COVID, because it's just a completely different world. And for me personally, it does feel like, I don't know whether I'm like vocalizing my struggles or being more vocal about my passions. I feel like I'm going to be taken less seriously from my peers, and that's really a major factor as to why I haven't really felt the urge just like create as unrestricted as I used to. I was a worse drawer like before I started working in animation, but I enjoyed it more. And that's the complex I'm starting to grapple with, I guess.
Oh, that's so painful. I'm so sorry to hear that. I've never been on the production side. We've talked a lot about this, and I've asked you so many like 101 level questions about
Mhm.
production. Uh, so I hate to hear that you have to have these concerns about being taken seriously. And I feel you that like working from home has to be a factor because if you're not in the office, you're not meshing with other departments, you're not finding the people that like, you talk together about work or your personal work and it like gasses you up, these environments. I know a lot of people really benefit from working from home, but if you're I don't know. For me, I find it really benefits my personal practice. And
Mhm.
it sounds like you should be able to have like people who are into that stuff and want to get behind you and what you're doing.
Yeah, yeah. Like the couple of times I have been in the office, like I've always been able to click with like a couple of people. But of course, because the politicization of COVID, it's like if I go into office too many times, the freedom of being able to work from home will be taken away from me.
Mm,
And I would rather just be able to continue to work without risking getting COVID. Pizza
yeah.
parties be damned.
Yeah, unfortunately, you may get more than pizza. Yeah, it's a sucky bargain that whether we go back to the office or not, I think we're all having to make. And honestly, I'm relieved how often it's come up just in the past like 10 minutes or whatever because it sucks.
Do you mind if I ask just like one direct question and then I'll
Yeah.
just pass it back to someone else? Um, like I have like various like talents, hobbies like outside of animation, but I feel like um yeah, I feel like in order to be taken seriously, I have to like do something that's more expected. And like I have been trying to chip away at some like original story project, but I don't know. Um like okay, I'm sorry. I guess like the script this I'm getting tongue tied. The specific question is it worth trying to just make a project for myself, even if I feel like people might not be able to connect with it or like my influences or whatever? Is it okay to like lean into interest or like skills that like might not be uh, specifically animation related or like anything? I'd love to hear your thoughts.
Yeah, if your bills are paid, yes. For the love of God, yes. Do that. That's it. That's the whole thing. Because
Right.
for me, like there are times when I'm boarding a lot and I put all that juice into my work that I don't have like a personal obscure weird thing that I'm like dying to come home and do. That juice has been expended elsewhere. And so I'm sure I've said this to you before because I say it all the time. I always say if there's something in you to make, for the love of God, make it. Because like that enthusiasm can drain from you. And you don't have to do it all at once. I always find I do better when I kind of come and go from a couple of different things. But like if you have like some niche freak thing that you want to do, keep that alive.
No, I'm I'm very tongue-tied tonight, but I'm absolutely going to take this to heart.
Oh,
And yeah, I just want to say thank you for everything, including beyond this. You were absolutely one of the major factors as to just me getting to this point. And I've been working for almost 2 years now. So Megan absolutely knows what she's talking about, everyone. So again, thank you so much.
oh, you're such a doll, and anything you do is going to be great. And I have nothing to do with you being great at production. You have an incredible temperament for production. This is an asset I don't have, so I'm right. Thank you so much for being here, buddy. Appreciate you.
No problem. Thank you.
There's Amanda Hamilton with a hand up.
I have another one from chat real quick if you want it.
Oh, sorry, Amanda. Yeah, go ahead.
not to slide in there, but I wanted to so it's slightly out of order, but I think this is directly kind of relevant to what you were just talking about. 100th with which in the chat asks, how do you get back into the swing of making art after years or any amount of time hiatus? I just got back into making any art after years of not making anything and I feel lost.
Yeah, it's hard. This has come up in like almost every answer. I am adrift without routine. So if I was doing this right, I would build it into my routine, which admittedly at the time when I was most productive is what I was doing. I was waking up early and that was drawing time, and that was when I would draw pretty much every day. And without that, I am a little adrift. So if you have that bone in your body, I recommend it. The other thing is that, like, for real, I don't know your discipline, but if normally you're a drawer, let's say, like you're me, whether you're drawing or not, have the thing you can fail at. So, like, about 10 years ago, I started to teach myself to play the ukulele. And for a number of reasons, I will never be good at it. And it's not because my ukulele standards are high, it's because I don't really hear music in the way musicians do. And I'm dyspraxic. I can't do more than one strumming pattern. So there's a real low ceiling on this, and it will never be good. And that is where I can fail. There are no expectations. I also, on my Instagram, I think you can see some, I make like weird paper wearables that like I take my picture in. There's no expectations there because like it's not a thing. So I would say like the best way to kind of get yourself going is find a place to fail. Do the thing you don't care about. Should I move on?
Oh yeah, sorry, I wasn't unmuted. Yeah, you're good
Oh,
to go
okay.
over the next one. Sorry about that.
No, thank you. Okay, Amanda, hi.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, hi.
Okay. Um, First of all, thank you for the talk. You were saying a lot of things that I thought were only problems, and it made me feel a lot better about my whole thing.
Oh, I'm
Um,
so glad.
yeah, it um I'm trying to sort of work back through what I want to sort of explain. So when Isidore was talking about like making yourself constraints, I remember that I would kind of try to do that at first, but it was like because I was making the constraints, it was almost as if I could like ignore myself and just be like, do whatever. Like I wasn't holding myself accountable at all, even though I was making the rules. I'd just be like, whatever. Like, I don't have to listen to you, and the you being me. Um, but like I remember I was struggling a lot the last couple of years because I would I then realized that in hindsight I would basically self-sabotage myself because I would get these like big ideas, like really ambitious ideas. And I'd be like so pumped about them for like a month. And I would be like talking about them all the time and thinking about them all the time and be like, yeah, and it's going to be like this and it's going to have this kind of thing and it's going to look like this. And then it would be so big that I wouldn't even know where to start. Like, I had it in my head that like a project needs to be big and it needs to be ambitious to be worth doing. And if it was small and if it was simple, it was almost as if like I shouldn't be doing this because I won't be learning anything or I won't be accomplishing anything or getting better or growing. It's like the easy thing was something I didn't need to be focusing on. And so it's like when I try to come up with something to ease myself into, like, give myself smaller goals, like, I almost can't gauge for myself what is a small goal or what is sort of achievable for myself to do that I can actually do. So it's difficult. Like when you were talking about the work that you used to do that was like easy and fun, I was actually thinking about, for me at the time when I was struggling the most with comics, the thing I was doing a lot that was easy and, you know, fun was fan fiction.
Ah,
And I realized in hindsight, thinking about it, it was because like it took some of the indecision out of the equation. Like I could just take the characters that I knew already, that I could just write, you know, without thinking about it too hard, and just plop them into a situation or a scenario. And what I would do with a lot of my writing is just make the characters talk, like have conversations, and then the plot would kind of form out of that back and forth. Even if I had like a vague, like so and so are, you know, it's a coffee shop AU, and they're blah blah blah. Like I could just basically riff um from that scenario and just kind of write something. And I was kind of falling back on that more because, you know, like I said, it took some of the indecision out. And it felt like with comics, it's like I was not only like, you know, the director, I was also the set designer, the character, you know, the casting director. Like I had to make all these different decisions and I would get overwhelmed with all the decisions I had to make. So it's like it would be really frustrating, and it would cause me to not see a lot of my projects to completion. So my I guess like my question is, it's like for somebody who has kind of like indecision problems and has a hard time gauging what they can do or they can accomplish, like what is a way to sort of like gauge what you can do when you feel sort of not even confident enough to know for yourself like what you can do and what you can accomplish, and like how to
yeah,
give yourself goals that you can hold
neat.
yourself accountable to.
Yeah. So, yeah, first of all, like you could have given this talk. Like that is everything. I feel this. Um, so in the beginning, you talked a little bit about constraints in terms of accountability. And I feel like I want to separate those out a little bit. As far as like deadlines and stuff, a lot of people do okay with like an accountability buddy as opposed to self-imposed deadlines. I tend to kind of buckle under that pressure. Your mileage may vary. But constraints is, for me at least, a little more like what Isadora was talking about. And that is effectively what you were getting from fan fiction, right? These are like sort of a pre-existing scaffolding and like
Yeah,
limits, right?
yeah, yeah.
So fan fiction is great. There are all these prompt generators. Way back in ye olde times before we had internet prompt generators, Brian Eno had this deck of cards called Oblique Strategies.
Oh
Um,
yeah, yeah. I've
anyone
heard of
look
this.
this up, they have sort of like ideas, and these were specifically ideas for constraints, and a lot of them are very unusual and they really are oblique, but they're applicable to anything. And I think that's like a necessary thing. I really feel the idea that like if something isn't wildly ambitious, it's not worth, particularly in terms of people's attention, which is hard to come by. It's not worth anyone paying attention to, and therefore not worthy of our attention. That is such a real and present feeling, even for me. Um,
Yeah,
but you want to obviously evade that if you can. As far as like keeping things within the scope of what you know you can do, I'm definitely wrestling with that a lot because like I'm kind of out of practice. My drawing brain is a little flabby.
hmm,
But what I do with deadlines is that I always ask for more time than I suspect I'll need. And sometimes I'm still wrong, but you want to take that approach with yourself. So like if you think you can do this, I assume you can see me, set yourself the goal of over here. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Because the most important part for momentum is that you get a win. So however meager the win, you're going to feel better when you have it.
Yeah. It doesn't help that a lot of my ideas are kind of vibe based. Like like I've been trying to like figure out exactly where this whole method came from, and I think a lot of it is sort of based around video games. Like I when I get like an idea for a character, it's not really like a character that's meant to be me or meant to be like me in any way. They're more like avatars. And I find myself kind of just almost like a magpie, like just sort of collecting like the vibe or the things that are kind of in the pile of Project A. And then what I used to do way more when I was way more indecisive about it is like I just have these different piles of these projects and I just kind of orbit around them and just kind of almost like wait for them to gestate or wait for them to like start sprouting something that I could go off of. Like I'll just poke this and see what's and you know if there wasn't really anything I could do with it, I'd orbit to something else and then I'd orbit to something else, and that would end up being like I never finish anything because I didn't have it like a story. And yeah, I don't know. Like it's almost like I'm making it harder for myself and not giving myself the the grace to do something easy. Like I'm almost like I don't I don't even really like making something is just like this is more atmospheric or like I said vibe based and there's not really like a clear story, like almost sort of this immersive game, but it's a comic, like and you kind of get clues or get impressions of things that I don't exactly spell out for other people. And even I'm just like, why do I have to be so like wishy-washy and vague? Like I'm not shooting a like an art film or something, or I'm not making like
Mhm.
an
You can
installation
be.
or immersive experiment. Like it should be a comic and it should be at least for people, you know, they should find something in it, even if I'm like giving them something and being like, you figure out what the meaning is from all
Yeah,
my weird
but
imagery.
so there's a lot here, and like I feel all these feelings. These are such legitimate ways to feel. So working backwards, because I don't want to forget anything.
Yeah.
So you're not making an experimental film, but nothing has to be marketable. And like I'm sure if you're a cartoonist, you've read other comics, you know that many things, even some like
Yeah.
improbably popular things, are not. And if you want to make like just a tone poem, I'm thinking of like Red Colored Elegy was one that was really good.
Yeah. Yeah.
What else? I can't think. Well, Blind Alley to a certain extent is about like mood or sort of like the feeling. I call it the weird feeling. You can definitely do that. And similarly, I would say that the magpie piles are a really natural way to work, and that is in fact how I work. Um, but the piles, as you elucidated, can become a research hole. So
Yeah. Yeah.
at a certain point, you got to take a pile, take your favorite pile, and start imposing, right? So you impose your constraints. So your format. If it's going to be a book, you pick the size of the book. If it needs a workflow, you pick one you can live with. And if it needs a story, Tom Hart has this framework called Story Flow that I recommend. Also, Georgia Weber and this other guy, Sam, oh, I forget his name, Sam Sharp, maybe. Say in the chat if you know. they have some interesting ideas about breaking story. But basically, where these things come from is sort of like taking your beats, which, if you're like me, and it sounds like you are, if you're naturally given to like dialogue and sort of like bits and pieces, taking your beats and sort of generating connective tissue. And that's going to be the frame of the house. Does that
Okay.
help?
Yeah, yeah. I think I understand what you mean.
It 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 does not get easier, but but there is a toolkit that you can like at least start with. Oh, that was the other thing I wanted to say. So the surefire way out of the magpie piles,
Mhm.
regardless of like what you're making or what shape it takes, is unfortunately just to start. I think for
Yeah.
me, because we're all short of time and my energy is limited and I'm nervous, I don't want to misuse energy. I want to do as much prep as
Yeah.
I can because I think that'll prevent me from making a mistake and I'll never have to redraw anything. And
Yeah.
I wish so badly that were true, but I've never had to not redraw, never not had to redraw anything. Does that make sense? So if
Yeah.
your anxiety is around like it's too soon to pull the trigger, I'm not like ready to do it without making a mistake, there's no such thing. So if you can find a way to find that freeing as opposed to terrifying, that is the ignition. That's what's going to make you go.
Okay. Yeah, I do feel almost like the stage fright in starting. And when I get advice, it's just like, just start doing it. And just like, it's like that episode of SpongeBob where he's procrastinating and I'm just like, my hand starts to shake and I just start to panic, like go into a cold sweat. It's like, suddenly I get the feeling that I've like just forgotten how to draw everything. Like when I give myself a constraint, it's just like, just draw something easy. Just draw something you know how to draw. And I'm just like, what? I've forgotten everything. Like I guess
I feel like that
it's
every time I start a storyboard. That is so.
yeah.
I've done this for over 10 years and I have no idea what to do. I will say if you have the means and the time, get what I was talking about earlier with the place to fail. Get a thing that isn't drawing and like see if you can get some energy going for that. Make that a place that's not just an outlet, but sort of like, I don't know, a place to put those feelings and sort of like get loose. Because I know for me, and it sounds like for you, drawing becomes this site of expectation and anxiety, especially if it's what you do or intend to do for work. It
Yeah.
is really loaded. So if you can find your playing the ukulele and never being good at it, you may find that a release.
Okay. Yeah. Um, I think Isadora wanted to add something, so I'm gonna let
Okay.
her.
Well, thanks so much. And hi, Isadora. Please do. Oh, my light is dead.
Hi,
Is
I think Mar is first. Not sure.
Oh, hi, Mar. Go ahead and thank you.
Hello.
Hi.
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay. Um, I just had a question because I'm going through a situation where I'm trying to like push through with a project that I kind of got down a shame spiral with because I was unable to finish it on time. And then I started to get shame because I'm like, oh, I couldn't finish it. And then I started to feel shame because I felt shame about not fit. It's a whole mess. But I wanted to ask, like, what do you do to, I don't know if recover is the word, but like to kind of bring you back to a place where you can take a deep breath and like start again when it's like real bad.
Yeah, I think that is such an insightful way to characterize that situation because when you were describing it, and I have been there, I think most of us have, I was thinking like that is hard to bounce back from. And that's what we want for ourselves, right? Is to bounce back. Um, it's really tough. When I was working more, like generating more personal work and also just like working more freelance, that was when I was the most bulletproof against stuff like that. Like when I would miss a step, blow a deadline, get a rejection, it hurt less because I had more where that came from. I don't know your workflow or like whether that's a factor. It's something to consider. But I will say in solidarity, when I moved back from LA, my visa ran out because I didn't get work, and I largely didn't get work because I was caught in a merger. A lot of stuff going into production got canned. But at the time I left, I felt a lot of pressure because everyone was really proud and excited. It was this hometown kid makes good. And when I came back, I felt like a failure. I felt like such a failure that I barely left the house for about a year. I didn't want to see anybody. I didn't want to talk about it. And when I did talk about it, nobody else thought I was a failure. Nobody else thought it was weird that I came home. Nobody else thought that the dream had fallen apart or that I'd messed up. It was like they didn't even compute what happened. They were just like, oh, hey. So if you have other people like colleagues or like other people who do the kind of work you do to talk to, if you haven't already, that may make you feel better. But I think also like try to find one new thing you're excited about, and like a new project or like a new hobby to suck at or whatever. And if you can like be excited enough, even just in the beginning when it's like a teeny tiny sprout, to come to the idea with more curiosity than expectation, let that help you like forget. You know what I mean? So it doesn't have to be like, I'll get it right this time. It's like, I'm pumped. I'm pumped to work on this. Does that help?
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you. I'm gonna do that now.
Okay.
Thank you.
You're welcome. And thank you really for that question. I thought it was really insightful, and like I feel so much compassion. I think you are gonna bounce back, and may it be swift and painless. We got Isadora with a hand up. Hey.
Hi, I think there was just gonna be like another question from YouTube.
Yeah, one more YouTube question real quick, and then
All right.
Isadora.
Thank you.
Isadora, you're good at this. Thank you, Nira. Go ahead.
Brandon asks, and this is pretty much related to the previous one you just answered, but what has helped you loosen up and embrace your innate qualities rather than trying to impose outside qualities on yourself? Like when you were talking about wanting to essentially make blankets earlier, how did you kind of loosen up past that?
Well, Blankets was released 20 years ago. So that's a part of it. No, Blankets haunted me for a long time. I mean, at the time I was making that work, Blankets had long come out and I had long since read it. It was just kind of a specter. I think a lot of it is that perspective. It's looking back and being like, wait a minute, like the stuff I was doing when I was having an easier time was perfectly good and in many cases better. Unfortunately, the trade-off for that is aging. But yeah, I think that perspective is really how I move past it. And at a certain point, like, and this comes back to the work that's in me to make. I even just doing mini comics, I learned pretty early on you need a workflow you can live with. Like I did this one comic, it's not especially beautiful or anything, but I was working in a way that like the pages were very labor intensive. The kind of toning I was doing on them was very labor intensive to sort of manage. And it was more than I wanted to do. It took more time than I thought was necessary to communicate this story. And it was more time than I wanted to spend doing it. And I think the work that's in you to make is partly like getting real about that. And I meant it when I said that, like, if I tried to make blankets, it would be torture and the results would likely not be good. But also, like, I think a lot of us like have a hard time like divesting from the idea that there's virtue in suffering. Like we know there isn't, but is there really? There isn't. And it's just at a certain point, like, I had to make it easier on myself or I would never produce work. That's it.
That's really good. Thank you.
Oh, no problem. Isadora, hey.
Hi. Are you hearing okay?
Yeah.
Me, in case,
Sorry,
not
I'm
your
looking
hearing.
I'm looking at your little thing, but my camera is here. So if I
Oh, no,
look
it's okay.
at
Thank
you,
you.
it looks like I'm making eye contact. Hi.
Okay. Hi. Well, I just wanted to share one more thing. Well, two more things that I thought about that have been very helpful and are a bit strange. They're not like the kind of advice that people usually give, so I think they might be helpful. Well, the first thing is, you know, that little voice that we have inside of our head, like that awful, harsh critic that we have, that people usually tell us to like be quiet and like, oh yeah, don't listen to that voice. Well, um, my solution to that is actually the opposite. Do listen to that voice, but instead, I'm sorry, Emily. But instead of listening to it and paying attention to it, try like using that voice to criticize people you like and the work that you like. So look at the work that your friends make and be like a very harsh critic in your head. Like, don't tell them the things you're thinking about, but like criticize them very heavily, because no matter what, you're gonna end up finding things that are positive about their work. And you're gonna find things like, you like your friends, you're not gonna be like, oh, you suck, like this is awful, this is the worst thing you've ever made. So I think it's really helpful to like, instead of trying to convince yourself that that voice is being too harsh, because we never think we're too harsh on ourselves, try being harsh. So and see if that makes any sense, if you can find meaning in that, because usually you can't. So that's what has been very helpful to me. And it also helps you to become a better critic and to like not take things too seriously, because even if there are a lot of flaws in a piece of anything you like, there's always going to be something that makes it stand out in a way. So, I mean, there are a lot of pieces of art and media that I really, really like, but I can find flaws in them. And that doesn't stop me from liking them. You just don't pay attention to that. So, like, that has been very helpful to me. And the second thing is more of like an ADHD thing, but it's also been very helpful, is like, accept your inconsistencies. So instead of being like, oh, I never deliver things on time, I'm really bad with deadlines, I stop all of my projects in the middle and I never finish anything, just embrace that and think like, yeah, okay, I don't do that. I can't have a routine. I can't like get up like 8 a.m. in the morning and start drawing and stop at 6 p.m. Like, that's not a thing I do. And instead, like, notice what works for you and apply that in your life. And don't just give up if you can't maintain a routine, because like that's what I've always done, was like I tried a bunch of routines, a bunch of things before I realized that I had ADHD, and nothing ever worked, because like you get excited about it and then it works for a week or like 2 days or a day and then it stops working, and then you just like, oh yeah, then I'm not gonna do it. Routine is not for me, so I'm never gonna do anything. And I don't think that's helpful. I think we can be inconsistent and make very good work. You just have to like account for that when you're planning things. It's like, yeah, okay, I might need a week of doing nothing, maybe, who knows. So yeah, it should be there. So if I end up doing things in that week, then good. But if I don't, then well, it's okay as well. I accounted for that. So I mean, and yeah, I mean, just embracing your flaws and not trying to be someone you're not, because I mean, just there's so much expectation on how we should like function in today's society, and I don't think most of us, especially artists, are really capable of that. So instead of lying to ourselves and lying to our peers, because I know like a bunch of people who I thought were like completely organized, who had their shit together, and then you get to know them and they're like, oh no, I have no idea what I'm doing, and like I'm pulling all-nighters every day, and you're like, wait, you too? And then you realize that everyone's kind of like that, so you don't have to like be self-conscious about it. And yeah, trying to be like this perfection, this perfect artist, perfect professional ideal, because no one's ever going to be that. So yeah, these are the things that have been helpful in my personal growth journey. Self-acceptance.
Yeah, I think that's a really good rejoinder to even what I was talking about with like having a workflow you can live with. The most compassionate thing you can do is really to meet yourself where you're at in any given situation. And you've really hit it on the head. I think these are such like gentle and curious and compassionate ways to approach ourselves and our work. Thank you.
Thank you.
We've got Luca with a hand up.
Okay.
I hear just a little bit. Can you speak up?
Let me switch microphones. Actually, this one isn't working.
I'm sorry, I'm having a hard time. Maybe if you put your question in the chat, we can have Nero read it out.
Okay.
Sorry about that. Is there any, I don't see any more hands, Nero. Is there anything else from YouTube I should address?
No, that's it from YouTube.
Oh, great. Okay, we got through it all. Okay, so we're waiting for our chat question from Luca. And in the interim, thanks so much, everybody, for being here and having your great questions. I really was worried there would be no questions. Oh, thank you, Isadora.
Is this any better?
I hear you, but it's a little bit.
Is this better?
Oh, that's much better.
Oh,
Do
okay.
that. Thank you so much.
So sorry about that.
No problem.
Yeah, so I have both a comment and a question.
Yeah.
My comment is just kind of really love what Isadora did at the very end there. And as someone with ADHD as well, who is self-taught, I would love to share some tips and also kind of like highlight that um that success and your path can look many, many different ways. I currently work as an art teacher, and I spent 2 or 3 years like just kind of floundering, trying different things because I decided not to go to art school because I couldn't afford it. So for anyone out there who can't afford to go to art school or tried it out and it didn't work out for whatever reason, shout out. Because self-teaching is a really big thing that I think artists do in this day and age, and it can be a very challenging thing to both be teaching yourself and creating things. I can't remember where I heard this, but it's something along the lines that it's inherently nearly impossible to be both a student and a teacher. Like there's almost like a power imbalance within yourself when you are both your teacher and you are also learning. So I think one of the things I wanted to bring up to connect kind of to Isadora's point is that what the analogy that really came to mind, if anyone's watched Kung Fu Panda, I love that movie. I love those movies a lot. But one of the things that I really love about the first movie is that it's all about everyone underestimating this character. And I think it's really interesting that a character like Poe has like really high self-esteem at first, like it seems, or actually, or very low self-esteem. Like you see this ups and downs, and I feel like it kind of relates to this artist, like you know, personality type that a lot of us, I'm sure, have. And there's the very critical master, in this movie. And I think we both have those two parts within ourselves, the part that's very excited and really into this stuff, because I feel like art to a certain extent really connects with our inner child and a lot of things that really make us excited about life and our passions. But then we have that inner critic that really is looking for us to be the absolute best and, can only pick out what's wrong with us and comparing us to like the rest of the artists that we see as the Furious Five, these like brilliant, like, masters at their craft. Like, why can't we be like them? And the whole like point of the movie is that Shifu finds out that Poe can't be taught like the Furious Five. He fundamentally doesn't function like them and doesn't have their backstory, their training. I mean, Poe entered much later in his adulthood into this like people who had presumably been trained since they were children. So also shout out to people who are learning later in life. Like, you're not a child prodigy. Like, you go online, you see a 16-year-old that's like drawing fucking brilliant images, and you're like, damn, yeah, okay. uh, um, so I want to kind of like really take this as a look at this character that we can love and empathize on a screen, and realize that is also yourself. And that one of the things that you can also like appreciate, like, not to kind of like fall into the individualist idea of like, ooh, be the main character of your own life, but in a way you can connect with that, I think. Um, and I just want to put out there that I think the most important thing that I've learned that has kind of just stood out to me from this this webinar, which by the way are really brilliant stuff here everyone's been sharing, is just the idea that you have to find the ways to teach yourself like that work for you, not just in like a very duh kind of way, like, well, duh, but I think really think of yourself as your own student. Think of a student, like I work with kids, I work with students, and if I have a kid who's having trouble adhering to the lesson, I try to think of alternatives, like how can I kind of accommodate to the students' like needs or behaviors. And there's certain times where, you know, uh, you're gonna have to like really adapt and like think, okay, I can't wake up at 5 a.m. in the morning and like work out and then eat a healthy breakfast and then work for like 3 hours uninterrupted. How can I work within my constraints and my behavior patterns and stuff like that? Like, instead of trying to fit yourself into a box that doesn't work. Um, some of the things really quick rapid fire that have helped me working with different art mediums, like really unexpected art mediums, stuff that I would never have dared pick up, especially they're cheap, like Crayola crayons, shitty like $6 pastels, shitty acrylic paint. Like, when I do one of my classes, there's usually a bunch of used palettes that the kids haven't finished the paint with. And sometimes I'll just grab one and be like, let me just use what's left here and see what I can make. So really setting the bar really low with yourself is like go into something with no expectations. Like, hell, you made yourself a bad batch of coffee, paint with it. You can use coffee as watercolors. So like really like try really crazy shit, and something will come out of that you might surprise yourself. And I think that's one of the important things is keep yourself um you know motivated by creating these exciting new experiences, because ADHD means that I'm constantly looking for the next shot of dopamine. I'm looking for the next exciting thing. So keep things exciting, and that way has been really helpful. So I am at least making things that are interesting. And yeah, that was my comment. Sorry it took so long. And then my question is actually, how do you like, I know that like the advice I get is just do it, just do it, just do it. And I found some local COVID safe events that are very focused. There's one fantastic one at Silver Sprocket that's called Sketchies, and it's about creating a comic page in the allotted time, 3 hours, 4 hours. Sorry, and that's it. There's a hard cutoff. If you want your comic to be in the zine that month, you have to finish it then. So something like that has been really helpful. But then in my own time, when you say just do it, like, can you narrate what that looks like? Like, you wake up, you've been putting something off, like what's going through your mind, and like what actually how do you just swat away all the thoughts and all the things and finally like, like sit your ass down and like, okay, we're getting this shit started. I don't care if I don't have the perfect thing. Yeah, like, I don't know. I'm curious on what like the literal like moment that happens looks like. Thank you.
Yeah, so thank you for your insights about playfulness, and especially it resonated with me trying new stuff and like having room for accident. I find like that's also so important for me, not just to make stuff that's interesting looking, but also like as an ADHD brain, it's really like I kind of want to like live on the edge a little bit like that. And as far as just do it, you have hit on the thing, and that is why there's an apology in the thing, because like I don't have necessarily a easy pill, but I will tell you the times I have been able to do it, here is how I did it. So, one, it sounds like you have a job. I don't know how regular your job is. If you have any kind of structure or routine pre-existing to work around, that is a constraint. And like all constraints, that's going to help you. So you already know you have to work around something immovable. If you, like me, have a lot of free time, it becomes amorphous and it's very difficult. At the time I got this to really work for me, and it was the time when I was cranking out all that Tumblr stuff, I had an hour every morning, and you know, at any given point in your life, and maybe 20 minutes and maybe 2 minutes, where regardless of what happened, I had to put my butt in the chair. And the chair had a piece of paper in front of it, or it had my current project, or it can have your tablet, it can have anything. You don't have to produce anything. It doesn't matter what happens, but your butt is in the chair for X amount of time. And whatever goes on in the chair, that's what happens. And something about that at the time did work for me. And I know for myself, and I suspect this may also be ADHD, but I'm fairly recently diagnosed. It may just be a universal. I'm better when I know there's an end. So if I know that butt in the chair can only last a maximum of like 20 minutes, 30 minutes, whatever, I find my attention span at best is about 45 minutes. That's typically what my timers are. I feel a little better about it. And whether it's good or bad, something usually does happen. And so building that muscle of going to the chair and sitting in it for however long, and picking up whatever you have at the chair and just touching it for however many minutes, that is how I did it when I could do it. But I will fully admit, doesn't work every time. And very much so now, I'll have days where like, I'll have my coffee, I'll put on my music, I'll take my Vyvanse, and I've set the conditions for the thing to happen. And I fall in a sit pit, which is an expression I like. And, you know, I keep telling myself like, okay, 2 minutes, it's go time. 10 minutes, it's go time. And we can kind of do this to ourselves over and over. Unfortunately, like, best case scenario, you have some compassion, which it sounds like you do, and are able to meet yourself where you're at and say like, it looks like chair time isn't going to happen today. But I do find that if you have a schedule, if you have like immovable pieces of time to work around, it's easier to get yourself to do something like chair time. Does that help?
Yeah, actually, that's
Oh,
yeah, like it's something that I very recently, like literally today, like I pulled out my planner and like wrote down like certain days where I want to watch certain art instructional videos, or days where I want to sit down and work on assignments from those videos. And it's the first time I've ever actually scheduled, you know, something like that. So I think I've done this with my self-teaching, but I feel like also doing it for my projects, for my like for fun drawing, and well, especially well, I think we all have a comic project in the back of our mind at any given point. um uh but yeah, I've it's a comic project that I've actually kind of like broken, you know, started breaking into and doing stuff for it. So I think I'm gonna take that to heart and really like put some things in the calendar, and maybe ask someone for help and accountability on that. Thank you.
oh, that's beautiful. I bet it's going to turn out great. I'm really pumped for you. Whenever I hear somebody has already broken their story, I'm like, you're already, it's all downhill. Way to go. You're on your way.
Yeah,
Well,
thank you so much.
oh my gosh, thank you so much. And thank you so much, everybody. And Nero, thank you so much. You were a hero today. And is it weird if I clap for you? I feel like I should
You
do
can
that.
clap. Go ahead.
Okay, it's happening.
Hey, thank you for doing this talk. This is incredible.
Oh my gosh, I'm delighted. I'm delighted. It went really good. So thank you so much. And if you aren't already members of the co-op, go be one. There's probably a link in the chat, or there should be. And yeah, just good luck on all your projects. Be nice to yourselves, and working harder and feeling worse isn't going to help. Go with God. Have fun.
Make sure to tell people where they can see your stuff.
Oh
as
my
well,
gosh.
too. Yeah.
Geez, are you a champ? Okay. I am at meghanlands.com, meghanlands.com. And I'm at Meghan Lands, all one word, on everything. And everything is Twitter and Instagram. I don't really have the other ones, but you can find me there if you need me, and follow me so I can follow you back and see all your cool stuff. I'm so excited for all of you.
Hell yeah,
Okay.
awesome.
All right, thanks so much. We did it. Yay.
Have a good night, everybody.
Have a good night. Bye.
Thanks,
Thank